My name is Daniella, and you are listening to the Audacious Path podcast, the one and only podcast that is specifically aimed at adventure creators just like you and me. Every 2 weeks, I talk to other creators within the adventure sphere, and I ask them about how they started and grew their adventure creator business. In today's episode, I am talking to Steve and Judy from Sailing Fair Isle. Steve and Judy have a long history of working in film, including working for the UK Channel 4 News and the BBC UK, and also through their own production company, Streamline Productions, where they produce documentaries. During our chat, Steve and Judy were incredibly generous with sharing their knowledge to help a YouTube channel grow, including things like how they chose which shot to take next, how they pick various aspects of the recording process and also in the edit to ensure that the film has a really good pace that keeps an audience engaged, and how to tell a compelling story without any storyboarding process. You can find them on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at SV Fair Isle. And I would absolutely love to hear what you think of this episode as you listen along. You can tag me or send me a DM at The Audacious Path, and enjoy the episode.
To start out with, introduce yourselves, tell me who you are, and can you tell me about what you were doing before you were sailing?
I'm Judy, this is Steve, and before we went sailing, in terms of work, we were television journalists.
So we've worked together for 30 years, making documentaries, training journalists. So we work mainly in Africa. Judy was Africa correspondent for many years. So
for Channel 4 News, which is a British news television program.
Yeah. So we've always had our own company doing documentaries, but then we work on other things. I work for the BBC mainly. Used to do news as well. So, you know, we've been in the industry a long time. And then when we started sailing, we were going to continue that. We were going to continue working during the winter, because in the Med you tend to not sail in the winter. You have the boat in the marina, and then COVID happened and stopped all that. So we concentrated a bit more on the channel, not really because we think it would make us a lot of money, but we had nothing better to do, to be honest.
We decided that if we were going to open a Patreon site, and ask people to donate, $5 or $10 or whatever a month, then we had to have something that we could say we were definitely going to do.
Yeah, so you had to properly commit to it and say that you're going to do. So we do one a fortnight. We don't do one a week. I mean, hats off to people that do it once a week.
I agree. They're brilliant.
That's hard. And we try and keep the quality as we would for broadcast piece.
That's incredible, because it feels like this is a very similar story to a lot of the channels that I have been interviewing, that the ones that have been successful, they came at it first and foremost from a perspective of like just showing videos or sharing them, but there wasn't really like this business mindset. And it's really interesting that it's becoming this theme across all of my interviews.
The thing with that, I think, is that if you do go at it with a business mind, then you probably don't love it. That you're seeing it as a business, and it's too hard. If it's not something that you do because you really like doing it, then you're not going to put the effort in that's needed to be able to do it. Because people think it's magic. They think that somehow you just live your life and you've got these videos and you can do it. But I mean, because you've made them yourself. So there's a lot of time, a lot of effort that goes into making them, and you're not going to do that if you don't enjoy doing it.
Yeah, for sure. And having gotten into this field of trying to help other channels and doing this podcast, and I have a newsletter as well. Now I get channels reaching out to me all the time, trying to get me to help them. And it's amazing how many channels there are. Like, there's so many that you just don't see. Like, you see Atticus, you see Uma, you see Dallas, you see you guys, but there's hundreds, I would say thousands of channels that you just don't see. There's just so many.
Yeah. But I think still for us, like our last episode, it probably is
the one that went out today, you mean?
We've got an episode that went out today, and to be honest, it is a home video. But
I spent more time on that video because it's not when you're doing, because we'll get to talk about, because I know you want to talk about the sort of storyboarding and how you put things together,
which we don't do.
but for this one, it wasn't an easy one to do because it's all over the place, because we were moving so fast. You haven't got sequences are chronological that you can work through and you can get an easy storyline going. So I've got all sorts of bits, and it took me, normally I take 3 days to edit something. Not full days, but over the course of 3 days I'm editing. This must have taken almost twice that long to do because of those bits and pieces. And then Judy has to sit there and work out, a script for this. And in the end, I mean, a good video is one that you don't need much script for.
I think
it's
that was
there.
the same with a news story. If you went out on a news story and it was, I don't know, some kind of disaster, an explosion or something like that, especially when we've worked in a lot of war zones, you go in and you just document what you see, and frankly the story writes itself. And those are the easy ones. The more difficult ones are when you go and you've got to try and make a story because you're there and nothing's really happening, but you've got to try and make a story.
If there isn't anything happening, we won't stretch something out so you've got lots of chat and lots of things, which is what sort of uses up time. And I've actually heard people say, oh, we've sort of done this whole section and that's great because it'll use up 2 minutes of video. Well, the opposite is what you need. You need to say, how can I squeeze this down? Because it makes it boring.
You guys mentioned when we were emailing back and forth that you don't storyboard. So what kind of thought are you putting into a video before you get going? Are you doing any planning?
No.
No,
Certainly not. No, it wouldn't.
It's like, what's going to happen next? I mean, the thing is, because we work to a great extent in real time, and obviously we're a bit behind. So literally, we put the video out on the Thursday, and we say, "Phew, we've got 2 weeks now, to sort of
Which
get
is
it."
fine,
And I have no idea what's going to happen. Because even it's like sailing, isn't it? Like we were planning doing this interview with you. We were planning to go and sail off tomorrow morning first thing, but you look at the wind and it's changed.
No wind,
So probably we'll do something else tomorrow instead, and then we'll go sailing on Saturday when the weather's better. So and so therefore with the video, what's the point of story planning?
But what you do have to do is you've got to decide what is going to go in the video and what isn't. There's no point in just filming everything. Because you're not going to get sequences that way, and it's just going to be rambling and long and whatever. So you've got to think, okay, I mean, we haven't filmed anything today, not a single thing, but we'll have a sequence in here. We've already filmed a little bit going to Calatra, which is a little town in a sort of sand dune that we've done here, and we can meld it into that. I mean, I already know that when we sailed overnight to get here, it was really quite a rough crossing coming here, and I want a shot of dawn with it really still, which I'll probably get up at dawn tomorrow and do, because I want that juxtaposition between the bit coming over with doing piece to camera saying, oh God, it's been 2 days and we're just being bashed about by this horrible swell on the beam. And then, we've done a bit because we came in at night, you can't film much, but I've got a little sequence in the dark. So it'll then just come through, mix through to something, at dawn saying, fantastic lagoons, this is what you've got in this part of the world. So you've got to think of those things as well. It's for sailors. What do they want to know? They want to know, what's here. So yes, definitely we want to do a piece about, probably with a map that I'll put in there. We'll have a little bit about, what's available ashore, what's there. And we'll have a little bit of boat life. If we get stuck here because there's no wind, we might decide we'll film a little bit about making a cake or fixing something on the boat,
And it's information. I think one of the things that I think the feedback we get from our audience as well, and of course, if you're doing it in this way, the audience is the most important thing. What do they want? What do you want to see? And they always say they quite like that the films we put out or the videos we do once a fortnight have a little bit of everything. We have, as far as possible, a little bit of going on shore, a little bit of info about the place that we're at, a little bit of sailing, like Steve says, the anchorages, which anchorage to go to, that kind of stuff. So we're kind of an info channel as well as entertainment channel.
What you want is something that people are going to talk about in the pub. If you find a story that it might not be a big news story, but we've got to fill a bulletin. If it's something that's interesting that people will talk about in the pub that night, then that's good. That makes a story.
You mentioned that, you had this beam on, you had the waves hitting you, and you knew the next morning that you needed to get some like flat calm because you wanted to show the juxtaposition, right? And you want to show that contrast. And it makes me think of like when I'm on a boat and we have like, big waves or whatever, I'm always kind of thinking, okay, like what have I told leading up to now? Like I've had, we're getting ready. We know the storm is coming. And then now we're at the storm. These are the elements that I need to record to make sure I capture this bit of the story. And then I'm thinking forward, okay, so what would happen? Is that kind of what's happening for you as well?
I think that's right. You film what's going on. Definitely.
Yeah.
And there'll be times, I think what what we're saying is that you don't know necessarily what's going to happen, because, for instance, when we set out on this, we didn't intend to sail overnight. Steve, actually, I think you did a piece of camera as we set off, as he sometimes does, getting the anchor up. Well, we're getting the anchor up now. We're setting off. This is what predict wind are saying. We've got this far to go, and we're probably going to get there by 8:30 tonight or something. Halfway across, it became apparent that was not going to happen because the wind had dropped and that we were rolling around like hell. The swell was ridiculous.
And we don't just turn on the motor, you see. We will sail. If we can sail, we'll sail. So, and people know that watch us. So we said, okay, well, we're sailing slower. We're going to get there in the dark. It is a difficult anchorage. It is getting in a lagoon, but we've been in there before, so I'm not too worried about the navigation. You've got to look at the tides, because there's a tide through here. If the tidal race is wrong, you can't go in. So you go through those things, because as a sailor, people will want to know those things and want to know how you think. But as thinking as a filmmaker, how you're thinking, it is just telling that story at the time. The juxtaposition thing was just that it is after having that time of just being bashed about, I know it's nice in the editing terms always to have that change of pace. So what you need within your pieces is changes of paces all the time. You need punctuation points and you need changes of pace.
Yeah. When you're going through that story and you're thinking, okay, so the tide's coming in, it's dark and all of that, how are you grounding yourself in the present to know which elements matter? Are you just filming anything? Like, how do you know that people are going to care about the tides? What questions are you asking yourself in that moment to be like, hey, this is what they're going to be interested in?
I think, what Steve said earlier, one of the brilliant things about this, about sailing channels, is you pretty much know your audience. Your audience are going to be people that are interested in sailing. Now, there might be some people that, aren't, but very few and far between. Not everyone has got boats, but most people have got an interest in sailing. What would they be interested in? They're interested in your boat. Like, we love Fair Isle. We think she's a fantastic boat, and a lot of our viewers...
They're interesting in other boats as well, so seeing other boats, so we do a bit of that.
Yeah, so we do that. So the answer to your question is, I ask myself, if I was watching this, what would I want to know?
We've had to learn, though, is that because as what we did before, as television journalists, I was firmly behind the camera. Judy was a presenter in front of camera, but she is not the story. We are not the story. You're anything but that. As a broadcast journalist, you are not the story, and you cannot have an opinion, and you cannot be in any way involved in the story. You've got to be completely independent. So the difficult thing for us was to get that, to say, that we are part of the story. But it got more and more of that, and it does as time goes on. I think for the people that are starting, the audience aren't invested in you because they don't know you. So you're not that interesting. So other things have to be interesting. But as time goes on and you gather an audience, people get more and more interested in you, and they want to know what you think. So, which is an alien thing for us as journalists to know, but they do. They do want to know.
Having said that, because we are journalists, we do interview other people as much as we possibly can. Other people about their boats, usually, to be fair. So, like someone, one of our patrons has got a trimaran. Well, that was fantastic, a trimaran, brilliant. Yeah. So we could have a look around their boats, interview them about their boat. So we're just nosy, really. I think
it's a good way to get onto other people's boats and nose around. Yeah, it's great.
Well, people like other characters. They do like to meet other people, and if you can get them to be reoccurring, it can have such an impact. So yeah.
Yes, it's a difficult one, because if you're actually just doing that, you've got to spend time. You can't sort of create that character quickly, because you've got the same thing. Unless it's someone that's already a YouTuber or whatever that people know, then they know the character and they're invested in that character. If it's someone that you're just meeting and you're just doing a little interview with them, the audience aren't really that interested because they don't know the backstory. They don't know much about them. So you need to have a fairly chunky sequence if that's going to work. Yeah. And what we do sometimes is we do a little bit, and there'll be a little bit in the episode. But then we'll do, if they are that interesting, we'll do a little standalone that'll go in the next week, which will be just on them. So for the people who want to see more, can have that. So
exactly. So it'll be a proper half hour on a couple in their boat, or a person in his boat, or whatever.
Can you explain what pacing is to a beginner and how it should work, why it's important?
Pacing is the most important thing about pacing is it mustn't be the same pace. whatever pace you're going to do your piece at, it must not stay the same because people zone out then. So it's got to bring you back. So it's got to have light and shade, and it's got to go there. So that's one thing.
One way you can change the pace up and down is through music, using different music, whether you've got natural music because someone's playing music on your video, which we sometimes happens, or whether you've got the bed of music underneath. So it's
normally a bed, but with the beds, I'm always looking for stuff that has got to change a tempo. So you look at the beats and you think you want something with a change. Music's, you've got to really take care with music. Most people use Epidemic Sound, which is really, really good. You get some really good stuff on there. You'll get used to how to search the good stuff out of there. And there's loads of, really good bits of music in there. But it takes time to find something that's going to fit. What I do with the sequence is, if I know it's going to be a music sequence, a montagey type sequence, I won't, because the pacing will be wrong. If you have the whole thing as a montagey sequence without any up sound, you need up sound. You certainly need the natural sound, the natural effects that are there. So don't think just because you put music on it, you don't need to hear the waves and the wind and the rest of it. You do. You absolutely do. We can talk about sound later and how you get that. But you need that. So you need that bed with your clean effects on there. But then you're laying your music. And what I normally do is I'll lay all of those shots long. So I'm working out the sequence of shots. So the shots is something to do with the pacing as well, because some things move fast. If it's got a pan in it, if it's got movement, whatever, you don't want movement one way and then the same way again. So you might want something that settles. If what you've got in a frame is something that's happening in the right hand side of frame, then if you've got another still frame next, it should be left hand side of frame. You want to sort of move around, because when people watch a screen, you think they're seeing the whole screen. They're not. They're watching a tiny part of it, and their eyes are going from one part to another, and that changes the pacing strangely. In that, if you have everything in the same part of the screen, it's a slower pace. So even by not cutting fast, you can up the pace by moving things around. But from each cut, you're going somewhere else, which you should do anyway. It flows much better like that. If you think of a jump cut is me talking. We never use jump cuts, by the way. It's just something is so alien to us in the broadcast world. When you're talking, you know what I mean by that. If you've got a speech and you're talking to camera and you want to cut some bits out because you get something wrong, and suddenly you just jump because you've cut the bit out between. To me, that's just lazy and I hate it. So I would never use it, but it does make life difficult. But the same thing happens even if it's not you as a talking head talking. If you've got a shot and what you're looking at the moment, as a human eye, you're looking at faces. So if you're looking at my face, I'm in, right hand side of screen. You want the next shot that you put on to be left hand side of screen, so that the audience's eye is moving, and it's much more interesting and ups the pace for you. So there's a million ways of doing it, but it's it's something you'll get used to. But what I do is I cut things long normally, and then I'll find the music and lay the music, and then I can pull it to cut with the music. So I'm just shortening those pieces up. So I've got really my sequence, so I know what shot comes after another to tell that story and to have the sequence, and so things are the right way round for where you're going to look. And then I shorten that up to fit the music, sometimes on the beat, sometimes off the beat, but whatever, and probably mix it up a little bit.
What would be the most important things for someone to learn about pacing if they were just starting? Like, they could always develop later, but what would be the 3 top things that they should just think about when they're trying to create their videos? As
a beginner, I think the basic thing is to not do things that are too long in one go. What you'll see is the basic error that most people make is, one, pointing the camera at themselves when they're talking about something that the camera's not seeing, and it stays there for too long. So that the pace of that is always going to be very slow. So there's other problems apart from the pacing, but that that is a problem. And if they're if that's what they're doing, if that's their style, is to talk about it and to show what's there, in human speech, you've sort of got one pace that it's going to go through. So even if they're going to narrate that sequence and put shots over it, they can't really change the pace that much. So it's got to be, something's got to happen. So it's got to have energy to change pace. So there's got to be energy from something to want to do that. So it could be that you've just jumped in the rib and off you go, and the music comes up to bring the pace up. the speed of the shots and the fact that you've got movement in the shots is bringing the pace up. So it's all matching. It's all there. So you've got to think in your head what you're doing when you're filming. When you do that. I mean, we did one of the pieces from the last thing we did was in Gibraltar, and I knew that it was a cardboard boat race. So basically, people were making cardboard boats that they were going to race around Gibraltar Harbour.
Who'd have thought?
So we were going to do this. We do the usual thing. We interview people. There's going to be lots of changes of paces in this because it's going to be fun. There's going to be great stuff. There's going to be music. There's going to be them going off. So it's going to be slow at the beginning. So we've got us walking around, chatting to each other, because people want to know what we think of these things, bizarrely. So we do. And we sort of say, which one do you think is going to win? I like this design, whatever. So you've got a bit of that, and that's a fairly slow pace. Then I did
interviewing some of the people who are making the boat. So you've got a general sort of setup piece.
Which is a slow pace, because it's us talking, it's other people talking. It's always going to be that pace because it's people talking. You can't mess about with that. I mean, you could try to with the vision, but it would just look odd. So don't do that. So that's going to be that pace. But then I did a whole section of sort of crash zooms with the camera. I had a 360 camera on a stick that I sort of whizzed around, coming from different pieces, because I knew, I might want a montagey piece, maybe with some music of, and some fun, people cheering, whatever, of movement. And that pace is going to be much faster for that. So you've got that. Then they arrive because they have to carry these cardboard things to the dock, and they're going to do that. They're going to launch. So that, the energy is sort of getting up there again. So when I'm filming, I'm doing much faster, doing little moves with the camera, doing that sort of stuff, knowing, this is fast, it's going to go, and off they go. I mean, there was another bit in the there where you had a brass band playing. What was it? Whatever it was. So I did a whole sequence of that, and of course, when you film that, I'm filming a band, so I want some actuality sound. Actuality sound is always really good. So if you're filming anyone that's actually playing an instrument or singing or doing whatever, keep the camera on them so you've got the good sound. For one thing, I mean, hopefully you can get them to film to do something twice, but normally you can't, and I couldn't on this occasion. So I made sure that I got the beginning and the end of this bit with some close-ups of people's hands on instruments, which I knew I'm going to use sync sound for that. Didn't turn the camera off as I walked around, so I'm still getting the sound for the next bits. A couple of bits of good sync sound, and then a couple of nice pull focuses and whatever. And I've got a sort of slower pace bit then, sort of between the things that I can have that music where Judy can put a bit of script on to tell people what's going on, a slower pace, and then bang, we can go off with the next one again. So you sort of get used to it, what you think is going to be fast and what isn't, but it's sort of how you use the camera. And because with that, I did do some crash zooms and things. I can slow those down in the edit, and you get some sort of really wacky stuff going on, knowing that I can play with that.
It sounds like your filmmaking skills have had a huge influence on understanding like which shots to capture. Would you have any kind of, and I feel weird saying tips and tricks because I feel like that's just so it minimizes your experience, but like things on like framing, composition, and just capturing overall just compelling shots in such a diverse and challenging environment?
If you're shooting, I mean, the worst thing you can do is sort of get a GoPro and shoot everything on a GoPro, because it's a wide lens. Everything's wide. Wide shots are not going to cut together well. They're just not. You're not getting that sequence on. You're better off if all you're going to do is one thing, is using a phone with 3 lenses, and then at least you can use the different lenses. So you've got a tight lens, you've got a medium lens, you've got a wide lens, and you can use the lenses. I mean, never ever, pinch and zoom in with a phone, because all you're doing is zooming in on the chip, and you're making the really degrading the video quality. It looks fine on a tiny screen, but as soon as you put it on a larger screen, it'll look absolutely terrible. So yes, you need a lens, a zoom lens, and of course nowadays, if you've got a modern camera with 3 lenses, you've got that on a camera, so you're actually better off than a GoPro in terms of the pictures you can get. Also, don't be lazy. Don't shoot a shot from here and think, that's my wide. I'm going to change the lens, or if I've got another camera, zoom in and get the tight from here. Not good to just do it from the same angle. Move the angle, move the size of shot, move the angle of shot, and then they're cut together much better.
And one thing we did today, a very simple sequence. Steve was putting battens. We got a new sale, hurrah! And Steve was putting the battens in, and so I shot that. So I shot him talking about what he was doing, and then you follow what he say, you use the camera to follow. But then we'll reshoot the detail of actually putting the battens in as a close-up that you can cut in whenever you want. And then the last shot is me getting sort of a lot further back, trying not to fall off the doghouse, to try and get the wide shot so that you can see, you know, the big stuff of him actually going through doing it, which again you can use as a setup or you can use as a cutaway as well. So that's the basic.
It's getting really those extra shots is really important. You were talking about, well, what shots do you get as a beginner? One of the really good things that's really going to help you out in the edit is if you've done something, certainly if you're talking about something, you've done a piece to camera, or even if you've just, you're just doing that wide with a GoPro or something, sort of telling people what's going on. If you've got a camera with a longer lens, get it in there, do those close-ups as well. If you're doing something, I mean, certainly if you're doing a technical video and you're shooting something, you're normally shooting yourself on the if you're working on an engine, putting an alternator on or something, you got the whole big shot and you're talking about what you're doing. But if there's anything in particular that you're talking about, then you need the shot of that. So you've got to remember what you've said, you go through it, think, okay, this is how I put those wires on. This is how I crimped that. I need to get that tight shot and do it. So, if it's something you can only do once, then yes, you're going to need a second camera, but normally it isn't. Normally you can just do it again. I mean, the thing that Judy was talking about today was just tying in a batten. And so Judy shot it all on a wide with me sort of saying what I'm doing and doing it there. But then I just undid it and it takes 10 seconds, get the close up, tie it in again. And I know I can put that in. And it means that, again, if I want to, if I mess up with how I actually, with what I said, I can cut that out because I've got that cutaway without a jump cut. And that's the way, if you want to avoid a jump cut, then just think about what you're saying and film the things that you're talking about. I mean, there's nothing more boring than a talking head anyway. I mean, you're talking about working in Africa. We worked in Africa for years training journalists. And the one thing about African journalists is they're quite happily put a talking head on for 3 minutes chatting, we said, no, we need pictures.
The other thing that I find myself thinking about when I'm filming is making sure that I'm not just having dynamic angles and composition, but I'm also changing up where I'm filming whatever it is. So like if I go camping, for example, because my channel has morphed to not just be sailing, but also a lot of land travels. And so if I'm camping, for example, I can do something that's like cooking near the barbecue or walking along in the bush or, being inside the tent, and also trying to like add that, dynamic content. So it's not just coming from like one place, it's coming from multiple places. Is that something that you guys do too?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think that's it. I mean, I think a good film, the viewer shouldn't really have any sense of how it's shot, should they? I mean, it's like they should feel
magic.
Feel that they're there, and it's exactly, it's magic. So if you're talking about going into your tent, then you can have that close-up shot of you unzipping the tent, for instance, as you go into the tent, and the sound of the zip of you going into the tent. Now, you're not going to get that all in one go. You might have to go into the tent and then come out of the tent and then film yourself unzipping the tent.
You also want that lovely wide with a camera, wide camera sat down low, with with a sort of the dusk sky in the background, and as you get in, the light inside the tent go on, and you see the sort of shadows are in the tent. That's you think, oh, that's a lovely shot. You want that shot, so that you have to go in and and get it.
I think what you said earlier about having lots of pictures, you can never have too many pictures to illustrate what you're talking about, and more pictures gives you more options in terms of the script as well, doesn't it? Or what you say.
But beware with beginners, because we're talking about beginners. Beware of overshooting, because it just makes the edit so much more difficult. You can get the shooting ratio down. You will. I mean, it's always going to be too high at the beginning, but you'll get it down and down and down. By knowing that what shots will work. But just some people have an eye for a picture. If you've got an eye for a picture, then you're halfway there. It's then just thinking, okay, how can I fit those ones in? What's the good pictures here? And the technical geek side of it as well, of thinking, okay, I've got 360 camera. Oh Jesus, what could I've got this. We did a shot in Malta, in Valletta, when we got this new 360 camera, that I had it on the end of a long stick, brought it down as Judy was walking into this fort. So it came sort of past her and then through the window of the fort and up and out. And it's like a drone sort of flown down there and through, but it can't be, because, it would have chopped her hair off as it went through. It's so close, and came through. So if you can sort of think of shots where, it's quite nice as a cameraman, it's nice anyway, just sort of think, how can I do a shot where people think, how does he do that? That's always a good one. And you've got the gear for it now. It's fantastic. The underwater, all the, GoPros, all the rest of it. Stick them in the water. They can go in the water. So have it in and out. I do stuff all the time on a stick over the side of the boat where you're there. You got waves, and then suddenly wave comes over the top of it. Great.
If you're enjoying this episode, then I also recommend that you sign up for my newsletter, where every 2 weeks I share research-backed and tested advice on how to start, grow, and monetize your adventure creator business. The newsletters include information on how to start your channel, how to build a brand, how to storytell, how to edit, and build an income, and much, much more. And I hope that you will join the growing list of other creators that are making their adventurous lifestyle sustainable.
You mentioned you capture beautiful images. What makes a beautiful image? What are the things that should be included in a beautiful image?
Oh, there's a million different things.
Well, sunsets and sunrises, lots of colours.
Well, lighting, because that's good.
Yeah.
It's good lighting. I mean, obviously, golden hour, you'll get sort of you'll get good light for normal, for architecture, that sort of stuff. If you're going to do anything with texture, then having noonday sun is rubbish. I mean, we worked in Africa, we used to just go and have a kip in the middle of the day, didn't we? Because you can't film in the middle of the day because
close-ups. People overlook how interesting close-ups are, and they do break up sequences as well. So if you're going through, I mean, here we've got some lovely, beautiful villages in Spain and Greece and places that we've been in the Med. And so, yes, get the sort of the winding through the alleyways type shot, but then get some close-ups of doors or windows or something like that. And I think, and then putting those things together and odd things that you see. I mean, I think if you think picture, and I think that's the name of one of our courses.
One of our courses was thinking picture.
Was think picture, and I think that's right. If you want to say something, obviously you've got to get pictures to illustrate it, which is the basic thing. But also, as you walk around, if you see that and think, oh well, that's a nice picture, film it.
Yeah.
Take a picture of it.
Yeah.
And because if you think it's a nice picture, other people will as well. So it is in the eye of the beholder to a certain extent. But I think a lot of people stand too far back when they take pictures.
Yeah.
I mean, we've all done it. We've all been,
You've got to get in there.
Yeah.
With anything with action. I mean, that's the thing, we used to train cameramen doing news. If you're standing back, even, if it's a I don't know, a riot even, you don't want to get in there. But in fact, you've got to get close. You've got to get in amongst it to feel, so the viewer feels that you're in amongst it. It's not the same, because you could get the same shot standing back on a long lens, but it's not the same.
No.
So anything that's happening, you need to be in there and doing it.
It's funny because it almost feels like the more I get into filmmaking, it's this cathartic, therapeutic experience where you're really having to get in touch with your feelings and how different experiences or things around you feel. And it's funny because I'm about to do an interview on tits and ass content with another chick. And one of the things that I've come to realize is that people like beauty. And then that's just one of the most simple, physiological, biological, whatever you want to call it, things that people want to connect with beauty. And if you can get in touch with the little glimmers in life that bring you joy, and you capture that image, that will translate to your videos doing better.
I think that's right. I mean, I think that's right. And I mean, we are surrounded by beauty all the time. I mean, you can never go wrong with a dolphin shot.
I mean, that is a thing. And if people like to watch things that are, that do have beautiful shots, they like to watch things that are shot well, as well, and are edited well, so they flow well. But yes, if it needs to have beautiful shots. I mean, one of the things is actually, I remember what I was going to say. I was talking about a lot of people with the beautiful shots. What they think is a beautiful shot is low depth of field. So they think, I've got to shoot everything on, a camera with as big a size frame as possible. So they get a full frame camera or micro four thirds camera or whatever. And they're using that to do everything so they can knock the background out of focus. And that's what they do. Well, that's, to my mind, a mistake, because it's horses for courses with cameras. So the fact that you've got action cams now, I mean, I use a lot of Insta360 cameras, but GoPros, whatever, that you can walk around with, and the stabilization is so good, you can show people and you can move it around without it looking, like a home video. I mean, when we used to train journalists, we always used to have this thing at the beginning where we say, okay, what makes you look like an amateur? And they would normally get the thing, and there's two things that make you look like an amateur. And in my opinion, the second thing is wobbly cam. It's home video, shooting it. People that don't know that you have a frame and you shoot there, and then if you're going to move, it goes from a frame that's a good frame, a nicely composed frame, to another nicely composed frame. And that's what it does. And you might shoot that in both directions, and you might shoot it at different speeds, so that when it comes to the edit, you can pick one that fits with your edit, the pacing of your edit, and which direction you want it to go in. But people that do that badly, they don't do the shot from one thing to another. They'll maybe sort of just wander around and, that's nice, and well, that's not a camera shot. That doesn't work. So it makes look like just very amateur type stuff. The other thing, and probably the more important thing for that, and we used to use a little clip. There's a guy, people that are into this sort of stuff should watch it, called D for Darius. He does stuff, filmmaking for sort of short films and stuff, and he's got a really funny little sequence where he's got lots of shots of people, like someone's close up of foot's going like, where's the footsteps? I can't hear any footsteps. No footsteps. And then sort of people told me, and there's a load of wind noise. Well, I can't hear what they're saying, whatever. And it's it's just completely rubbish. The sound is rubbish. And he comes out at the end and says, well, look, if you're not going to have decent sound, then that's going to make you look like an amateur. Who's an amateur? This guy is an amateur. It makes you look like an amateur. And there's nothing else that makes you look like an amateur more than bad sound. So yeah, bad sound and wobbly cam, waving a camera around are the two things that you must avoid.
How do you decide when it makes sense to have, the background sounds like the zip of the tent or the footsteps and all of that versus having complete silence or having the music take over?
No, you have to have, even if you've got a bed of music, you still have to have
still
have to have the natural sound.
Yeah.
It looks odd otherwise.
Yeah. And what you do with natural sound, well, because sometimes, yes, it can pretty much overwhelm it. So it's not there pretty much anymore, depending on what the sound is. If you've got music and all the sound you're doing is you're in a field with some corn, then the music's always going to be too loud for you to hear but most of the time, certainly with what we're doing, sailing, there's wind, there's waves, there's whatever.
Yeah.
And if you've got no sound and you've just got music, that's just not right. You need it there, and you need to have the sound coming up and down, not just coming down for narration, but coming down sometimes so you can hear what's happening. Yeah. It's that's that light and shade, and it's pacing as well. So that's all important. But what you have to do with that, because a lot of times, I might be standing on the bow of this boat in a false 8, filming something with the sails, and it's going everywhere. No matter what I do, I've got lots of ways of getting decent sound in a lot of wind, but pretty much nothing I'm going to have in that situation with me standing on the bowsprit of this boat trying to film something. I'm not going to get decent sound. So if I filmed that shot, what I'll do is, as soon as I then got back in the cockpit, I'll film a bit of natural sound of that wind and waves. So I'll be, I'll have the camera just in the doghouse in here pointing out at the wave, so I haven't got the wind straight across it, and then I can get some decent sound.
You mentioned a story arc. How do you guys feel that your background in filmmaking has affected how you guys tell a story, like doing a story arc? Because you did mention that you have quite a documentary style. How is that different, and how does someone go about choosing their style?
Well, a story arc and style are two different things, really. A story arc is we begin here, and then this is what happens, and then we have an end. So I think it's important to have a beginning and an end. We cheat slightly in that we always, as Steve mentioned, I think earlier, we start our piece with a piece to camera, us chatting on deck usually, or somewhere else on the boat. And then we end in the same place. So that is our story arc. So that's really simple, frankly. Usually in terms of the bit that comes in the middle, it's usually chronological, as in, we started our journey in Sicily, and then we ended up in Sardinia. So that's the story that we told. So and then the bits in between, we try and make it. I think content is the most important thing as far as that's concerned. We do try and have a little bit on shore. a little bit sailing, a little bit sort of technical. So that's our style, if you like. It's our documentary is watch our video. What will you get out of watching our video? You'll hopefully be a bit entertained by seeing nice pictures, but you'll also find out a little bit about the countries that we go to. You'll find out a little bit about sailing, passage planning. We'll tell you a little bit about that, and you know,
and increasingly you'll learn more about the lifestyle through us, because that's what people want. That's what's different in this style of doing stuff on YouTube than elsewhere, because we're sort of going through. They want to know your take on something, how hard you found, you know, what you're doing, how easy it was, how nice it was, how horrible it was, whatever. They want to see those things. And one of the difficult things to do, but for new people doing it, you should try and do, is to have not everything as a monologue. So it's easy to do a piece to camera. Well, it's not easy, but I mean, you know, once you get used to it, the easiest way to do a piece of camera is just for you to talk. It's more difficult to have you talk and interaction to go through. But if you can do that, if you can get, you know, a conversation going, which is succinct, because normally conversations, you know, you do it and then you end up thinking, oh God, how am I going to? I can't edit this. I've shot it on one camera, and it lasts for 4 minutes. You know, quite often, we'll do that. I might be sort of standing on deck, just brought the anchor up, and I walk down the deck, and I've got the GoPro, and I'll just say, well, you know, that was interesting. Got a load of mud on there. I thought this was, you know, sand anchorage or whatever, and then I'll come round to Judy, who's, you know, in the cockpit, and or say something to her, say, oh, you know, wonder what else is going to go wrong today, or whatever, something, and she'll give me a reaction. She'll just talk, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but when it does, you know, you'll get something that's just chatty and natural and better.
Yeah, I have found that some of my best footage is when people didn't even realize that I was filming them. So I totally feel that. That's a good tip for people as well, because like I said, you guys are giving us some gold here.
Just one thing though with that, if you're doing that, just remember the rules of a microphone, that you double the distance, you quarter the amount of sound. So really important how far away that camera is, because it's a camera microphone. So if you're using a GoPro with a foam cover, like I would be then, I mean, I've got it, you know, arm's length away from me as I'm walking. As I come around to Judy, if I'm 6 foot away from her, forget it. I haven't got that sound. So I've got to position that camera. I've got to know that I'm bringing that round, and that's my microphone. That camera's my microphone. That's coming round, and it's coming an arm's length away from her. So I've got her sound when we come round, and then you've got good sound from both.
What advice would you give to other filmmakers or people with your background going into YouTube?
Don't go into YouTube expecting to make a living at doing it. That's a recipe for disaster, I think. I mean, that you'd have to be so lucky to be able to do that. But don't let that put you off if it's something that you enjoy doing and you can do alongside something else, and you're doing it because you enjoy it. But then, you know, if you can make that work, because, you know, depending on what genre you're in, I suppose, so some are easier than others, but most are going to take time. So, you know, you might be working for 5 years before you get your channel going. And in that time, you're not earning money, you're losing money, because you're buying cameras and edit gear and everything else, and it's using all your time. So yeah, you've got to love doing it, if that's what you're going to do.
Would you give the same advice to people trying to start a YouTube channel that aren't filmmakers?
I think having done work with film before we did YouTube has helped us A, know that we love it, B, know that this is how we think anyway, that we would always want to make films. But it hasn't made us necessarily successful on YouTube, because I think hitting the YouTube algorithm, getting the right thumbnails, doing all of that stuff is just a whole different ballgame. And it just is. And some other people that you interview will probably be better at that than us, almost certainly. Yeah. So in terms of whether you have been a filmmaker before or after, doesn't make that much difference. And then I think some of the best YouTubers that we've seen, nearly all of them weren't filmmakers in the first place. Always watch films, Watch YouTube, watch as much as you like. And then in terms of style, coming back to one of your earlier questions, you will find what resonates with you.
Yeah.
And you think, oh, I think that
Yeah.
this channel's really good, or this film is fantastic. I can see myself in that.
Yeah.
And there'll be some things that you think, oh, that's really not me.
And one of the good things about, you know, having people that aren't filmmakers and have just come into it but love it and, you know, and really go for it, is that they could come up with something just different that you hadn't thought of, that people like us that have a certain style that we've always used would find much more difficult to do. You know, they've just think differently, so they come out with something that you know that they do.
How can people find you?
Sailing Fair Isle.
On
YouTube. So it's Sailing Fair Isle on YouTube. And SV Fair Isle on Instagram. We're not very good at Instagram, but we're trying. I think you've got like 2,000 subs at the moment.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you found any value in this at all, you could help me grow by sharing this podcast with someone else in the adventure space, or leave me a 5-star review on Apple or on Spotify podcasts, or whatever your podcast listening device is. It really does help me grow, and this is not free to produce, and I make no money off it at this point. So thank you so much, and I will see you in 2 weeks.